What if I told you that the world where billionaires control more wealth than entire continents wasn't built by accident, but by design? That two leaders in the 1980s rewrote the rules of capitalism so completely that today a handful of people can buy elections, rewrite laws, and operate like modern-day kingdoms, all while paying less in taxes than you do. If you want to understand why everything feels rigged, why working harder doesn't mean earning more, and why the ultra-wealthy keep getting richer while everyone else treads water, you need to dig into the past. Because the system we're trapped in today, it was engineered, and I'm about to show you exactly how. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. This channel uncovers the buried truths about money, power, and history that they don't teach in school. You're here because you ask questions others ignore, so let's dig together. They sold us a dream, a world where the market would fix everything, where competition would create fairness, where anyone with talent and drive could rise to the top. They called it freedom. But nobody mentioned that this freedom came with a steep price, and only the ultra-wealthy could afford the entrance fee. The system we live under right now, where billionaires can outspend nations, where corporations write the laws that govern them, where wealth concentrates at the top while the rest of us fight over crumbs, didn't just happen. It wasn't some natural evolution of capitalism. It was built, brick by brick, policy by policy, by two powerful politicians who promised to rescue the world from economic collapse, Margaret Thatcher in Britain and Ronald Reagan in America. And to understand how they constructed this billionaire paradise, we need to travel back to the chaos of the late 1970s. Picture this, it's 1979. Britain is called the sick man of Europe. Inflation is running at 25%. That means your money loses a quarter of its value every single year. Garbage piles up in the streets because sanitation workers are on strike. Coal miners can shut down entire industries with a single vote. The government seems powerless. Across the Atlantic, America is drowning in its own nightmare. Oil prices shoot through the roof after Middle Eastern countries cut supply. Interest rates skyrocket past 20%. Imagine trying to buy a house when your mortgage rate is higher than a credit card today. People wait in line for hours just to fill their gas tanks. Economists invent a new word, stagflation. It's when your economy stops growing, but prices keep rising anyway. Everything the post-war generation believed about economics, spend your way out of recession, keep people employed, manage prices, suddenly stops working. The public panics, politicians scramble, and into this chaos steps a philosophy that promises simple answers: free market fundamentalism. Enter Milton Friedman, an economist from the University of Chicago who believed he'd found the secret formula. His message was seductive in its simplicity. Government is the problem, markets are the solution. According to Friedman, if you just got government out of the way, stopped regulating, stopped controlling prices, stopped protecting workers, the market would naturally balance itself. Competition would drive innovation, prices would find their perfect level. The invisible hand would guide resources exactly where they needed to go. It sounded scientific, logical, almost mathematical. There was just one problem. It was based on a fantasy version of human behavior that doesn't exist in the real world. But Thatcher and Reagan didn't care about the fine print. They read Friedman like it was gospel, and they were about to make his theories the law of the land, no matter what it cost. When Margaret Thatcher stormed into 10 Downing Street in 1979, she didn't come to compromise. She came to burn down the old system and rebuild it in her image. Her first budget was economic warfare. She jacked up interest rates to choke off inflation. She slashed government spending. She deliberately triggered a massive recession, not by accident, but as strategy. Unemployment doubled almost overnight. Factories closed. Entire towns built around manufacturing went dark. Communities that had thrived for generations suddenly had nothing. But Thatcher called this necessary pain. She believed Britain needed to be purified through suffering. Inflation, she declared, was the great destroyer of nations, and if people lost their jobs, their homes, their security in the process of killing it, well, that was the price of discipline. She wasn't trying to help the economy, she was trying to remake society itself. Meanwhile, in Washington, Ronald Reagan was selling the exact same medicine, just with better marketing and a Hollywood smile. In 1981, he signed a massive tax cut. The top rate, what the richest Americans paid, dropped from 70% down to 50%. 5 years later, it fell again to just 28%. Reagan promised this would trickle down.
The theory was simple. If rich people kept more of their money, they'd invest it, create businesses, hire workers. Prosperity would flow from the top to the bottom like water. Except it never trickled anywhere but up. The wealthiest 1% saw their share of national income nearly double within a decade. Corporate profits soared. CEO pay exploded. And for the first time since the Great Depression, the middle class, the backbone of American prosperity, started shrinking. Not loudly, not obviously, just steadily, statistically, permanently. Reagan called it freedom, but it was really a heist. Both leaders understood something crucial. If you want to transfer power from workers to owners, you need to crush labor's ability to fight back. In 1984, British coal miners went on strike. These weren't radicals. They were men who'd spent their lives underground, keeping the lights on across the country. They were fighting for their jobs, their communities, their futures. Thatcher's response? Total war. She stockpiled coal for months in advance. She deployed riot police by the thousands. She vilified the miners in the press as the enemy within. After a brutal year-long battle, the union broke. The miners lost everything. The message to every worker in Britain was clear: you are replaceable. Reagan sent the same message in America. When air traffic controllers went on strike in 1981, he didn't negotiate. He fired 11,000 workers in a single day and banned them from federal employment for life. Strikes across the Western world collapsed after that. Unions lost membership, power, and influence. Workers stopped asking for raises. Job security became a relic of the past. And capital, the owners, the shareholders, the executives, began dictating terms without opposition. Thatcher and Reagan shared another belief, that private companies could do everything better than government. So they started selling off public assets to the highest bidder. Thatcher privatized British Telecom, British Gas, British Airways, even the water supply. She launched the Right to Buy scheme, letting people purchase the public housing they lived in at massive discounts. Sounds generous, right? Millions of families became homeowners. But decades later, those same homes became investment properties for landlords. Britain stopped building affordable housing. Today, the country faces a housing crisis so severe that entire generations can't afford to buy homes in the cities where they work. Short-term sugar rush, long-term disaster. Reagan followed the same playbook in America. He deregulated airlines, trucking, telecommunications, and, most fatally, finance. In 1982, he signed a law letting savings and loan companies speculate with depositors' money. The industry went wild. Within 10 years, it collapsed, costing taxpayers over $100 billion to clean up the mess. They called it liberating the market. In reality, they were deregulating consequences. In 1986, Thatcher launched what's known as the Big Bang, a single day when decades of financial regulations were wiped away in London. Suddenly, the City of London transformed into a global money machine. Computers replaced old-fashioned trading. Foreign capital flooded in. Complex financial instruments, derivatives, futures, swaps, turned finance from a service industry into a speculation engine. Wall Street noticed. Junk bonds became weapons. Leveraged buyouts let corporate raiders take over companies using borrowed money, strip the assets, and walk away rich while workers lost pensions. This was the new economy: quick money, low taxes, zero accountability. The age of making things was over. The age of making money from money had begun. And the billionaires? They were just getting started. But Thatcher and Reagan understood something deeper than economics. They knew that to make this system permanent, they had to change how people think. Thatcher once said, "Economics are the method, the object is to change the soul." She didn't just want lower inflation. She wanted a new kind of person, competitive, self-reliant, distrustful of government, and obedient to market logic. Reagan sold the same idea with charm. "Government is not the solution to our problem," he announced. "Government is the problem." And people believed him. Here's the irony. Both leaders used massive government power to force their free market into existence. They deployed police to break strikes. They imposed economic shock therapy from above. They used every tool of state power to reshape society in the image of capital. They didn't free markets from politics. They made markets into politics. This wasn't a natural evolution. It was a coup, bloodless, quiet, and wildly successful. Here's a dirty secret they don't teach in economics class. The first real test of this free market revolution wasn't in London or Washington. It was in Chile, under a military dictatorship. After General Pinochet's coup in 1973, a group of Chilean economists trained at the University of Chicago, literally called the Chicago Boys, turned the country into a laboratory. They privatized everything: pensions, water, healthcare, education. They slashed government spending. They opened the economy to foreign corporations. Inflation fell.
Investment rose, and inequality exploded. But here's the key. To make those reforms stick, they had to silence opposition. Unions were banned. Protests were crushed. Dissidents disappeared. It was the same ideology Thatcher and Reagan would celebrate as freedom, tested first in a country that had none. When Thatcher later called Pinochet a friend, she wasn't being polite. She was acknowledging a shared blueprint. He had proven what the theory required. Sometimes forcing markets onto people requires force. By the end of the 1980s, the results were undeniable. Wealth was flooding upward at a rate never seen in modern history. In 1980, there were fewer than 50 billionaires worldwide. By 1990, that number had exploded. The richest 1% in America owned more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. Tax cuts didn't trickle down. They pooled at the top. Wages stopped rising with productivity. Corporate profits soared, but workers' paychecks flatlined. The formula was simple: cut taxes on the rich, deregulate industries, weaken unions, privatize public assets. The result? A machine designed to concentrate wealth and protect it from ever being redistributed. While other rich countries built safety nets, America built a different model: replace security with debt. Get sick in Canada, Germany, France, or the UK? You get treatment. The bill is covered. Get sick in America? You get a bill that can bankrupt you. Cancer treatment can cost over $100,000, even with insurance. Lose your job in Denmark? Unemployment benefits replace up to 90% of your income for nearly 2 years. Lose your job in America? You get maybe 40% of your wages for 6 months, if you're lucky. In Sweden, parents get 480 days of paid parental leave. In America, 0, unless your employer is generous. University in Germany costs less than a laptop. In America, it costs as much as a house. Student debt now exceeds $1.7 trillion. Here's the kicker. Americans pay roughly the same percentage of their income in taxes and mandatory costs as Europeans. The difference? In Europe, that money buys healthcare, childcare, education, and security. In America, it buys profits for insurance companies, banks, and landlords. So the myth of American freedom hides a brutal truth. You're not free from the system. You're free to owe it. Medical debt replaced healthcare. Student loans replaced affordable education. Credit cards replaced living wages. In the richest nation on earth, one medical emergency or one layoff can still financially destroy a family. Not because Americans are lazy, but because financial dependency was baked into the design. By the 1990s, the Thatcher-Reagan model went worldwide. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Western institutions like the IMF and World Bank saw an opportunity. They offered loans to struggling countries, but with strings attached. Privatize your industries, cut social spending, open your markets to foreign corporations, deregulate your economy. It was called structural adjustment. In practice, it was the same shock therapy Thatcher used in Britain, exported to Latin America, Eastern Europe, Africa, and Asia. Countries that resisted were frozen out of global finance. Countries that complied saw their public assets sold to multinational corporations for pennies, their workers' protections dismantled, and their economies reshaped to serve foreign investors. The free market revolution wasn't just a national policy anymore. It was global doctrine. By the 2000s, the transformation was complete. Corporations could move faster than governments. Money could flow across borders in milliseconds. Tax havens multiplied. The financial sector became a shadow state, one powerful enough to crash the global economy in 2008 and then send the cleanup bill to taxpayers. Notice the pattern? When things go wrong under this system, the costs are socialized. When things go right, the profits are privatized. That's Thatcher and Reagan's real legacy. Today, there are over 2,600 billionaires. Their combined wealth exceeds $14 trillion, more than the GDP of most of the world combined. Some own the platforms where billions of people communicate. Others run private space programs. They're not just rich, they're operating as parallel governments. And the politicians who once served voters now compete for their approval. Look around. The logic of the 1980s still runs everything. Cut taxes to grow the economy. Deregulate to spark innovation. Privatize to increase efficiency. It's the same script with updated language. Disruption, optimization, competitiveness. Different buzzwords, same scam. Because the game hasn't changed. Only the stakes have grown. Today, the wealthiest individuals can move stock markets with a single post online. They can fund entire political movements. They can lobby governments into paralysis. When a billionaire's net worth exceeds a country's annual budget, we're not talking about free markets anymore. We're talking about private empires. The old powers, kings, presidents, parliaments, still exist. But they operate inside an economy they don't control. The map is redrawn. We used to measure power by borders, armies, and governments.
Now, power is measured in balance sheets. The map of influence today isn't drawn by nations, it's drawn by net worth. When a tech CEO can negotiate directly with heads of state, when a hedge fund can destabilize a currency, when a single individual owns the digital town square where public debate happens, that's not capitalism. That's private geopolitics. And for the first time in modern history, elected leaders don't just answer to voters, they answer to capital. Here's what they won't tell you in school. Thatcher and Reagan didn't save capitalism. They rigged it. They built a system where wealth flows upward by design, where work no longer guarantees security, where entire generations will be poorer than their parents. They called it freedom, but they really made freedom smaller. Your share of it anyway. They promised the state would shrink. What actually shrank was your power, your stability, your future. And the billionaires they created, they're untouchable now. Too rich to regulate, too powerful to tax, too connected to challenge. History doesn't repeat itself, but it compounds. The choices made in the 1980s are still paying dividends today. Not to you, to them. If you don't understand how this system was built, you'll spend your entire life working inside it, wondering why you can never get ahead while someone else gets richer while they sleep. But now you know. You've seen the blueprint. You understand the design.
And knowledge? That's the first step to breaking free. If this opened your eyes, smash that subscribe button. History has the answers buried beneath the surface, and I'm here to dig them up with you. See you in the next excavation.